I'm Tom, that over there's Mike, and we need to tell you about WCW Worldwide. It's a whole court-ordered thing. I drove my car through something. He was my accomplice. Don't ask. Now, Worldwide, it started, in the 80s, and it was this action-packed arena show, unlike the other shows that were in a studio. Great angles, hot action, etc. WCW carried the tradition on the same type of setting, but the crowds kept getting smaller and smaller in the 90s and got kind of sad for a bit, even though I like the shows. I think the shows are very entertaining for the most part. But in summer 1993, a handsome, well-coiffed, debonair Minnesota, whatever it is, named Eric Bischoff, was given the reins for WCW television. He was told, make it look pretty. Make us like the WWF. And he got on the phone with anybody he could find at Disney, and he was like, hey, what if we did wrestling there? And thus WCW Worldwide at Disney MGM Studios was born. Now, if you were a, quote, smart mark back in the early mid-90s, this was like Eric Bischoff was going to church and peeing all over the floor. Everyone was up and their arms were up, babies were being thrown. Because his plan was to tape television 3-4 months out, both due to cost and the fact that it was probably hard to get the building for, every week or every couple of weeks to tape regular TV like you would in other places. They had to use the soundstage and just tape hours and hours and hours of television, giving away future plans, finishes for pay-per-views, who would be champion, who would lose the championship, new wrestlers coming in. Cats and dogs would be kissing in that very ring. It was nuts. But you see, they didn't see a problem with it because they figured, we'll just bus in tourists. And that, for the most part, that's what the crowds were. They weren't even really wrestling fans. They were tourists at Disney who just wanted to get out of the sun. Listen, I've been a Disney goer in the past. I completely get it. I have seen the Frozen sing-along probably 8 or 9 times because that place is so hot and I love the air conditioning. Let it go. Some rebellious wrestling nerds got in there and were like, we're going to thwart you, Eric Bischoff. And they show up with their notepads and their pens, and they wrote down the results. And then they got on the phone to Dave Meltzer and like, hey, Dave, what up? And Dave's like, not a whole lot. Just moving around all these papers everywhere, throwing papers, printing papers everywhere. In his office, it's full of papers. And they would give him the results, and then he would put them in the Observer. Wade Keller, that young man from St. Paul/Minneapolis, whatever town he's in. He seems like a nice guy. I'm not going to make fun of him. Thankfully, nobody flipped out too bad, because at the time, the percentage of wrestling fans who had access to this information could probably all fit in a single 2-bedroom apartment. There was some wild stuff that would get taped at these shows at Disney and then never see the light of day. I'm talking Ric Flair allegedly cutting promos on Mr. Perfect under that name. A couple of different times when they thought they might have had Kurt Hennig coming in well before he actually did in 1997. Or, Sid came out with the big gold belt and he did promos and matches where he's like, I'm the world champion and I beat Vader at Starrcade. But then they couldn't use that footage because, sometimes you just get mad and you want to stab Arn Anderson. That's why he carries the Glock now. Clash of the Champions incident, August of 93, where they had already taped matches at Disney World with Arn Anderson and Paul Roma as the World Tag Team Champions, having defeated the Hollywood Blondes. Brian Pillman blew his knee out, and instead of canceling the match like they would have been able to do otherwise, Lord Steven Regal had to wrestle in his place so they could get the belts off of them, so they didn't have to dump all this footage they had just taped. But despite what the newsletters would tell you, despite what those types would tell you, WCW taping 4 months of TV at a time at the soundstage, it didn't kill the business, man. And it helped WCW because that studio was down the road from the Thunder in Paradise set where Hulk Hogan was blowing up bad guys on jet skis. And, Ric Flair got to talking with him. He's like, hey, here's my buddy Eric Bischoff, Eric Hulk Eric, or Terry, whatever. I hear they have a difference in anatomy. And from that, Hogan is convinced to come into WCW. And it sweetens the pot because they're taping a lot of TV down the road from the Hulkster's house. And Hulk's not having to drive to some dingy theater in Atlanta, every week. He would eventually, but he much preferred to go shoot, 3 months of TV in Orlando and then be left alone. So he could film Problem Child 8. The problem is now the old man, ... or is it? This would go on for a while, and then Nitro comes in September 95. Weekly live television where they start booking angles based on what happened the previous week. They changed their booking based on the ratings, and now everything's out of control. And they got all this TV in the can at Disney World that they can't change, but they're changing the main booking every week based on the new live show. It's kind of a shitty situation to be in, to be honest. I think the most flagrant situation of something going completely kaboom in their face. The Macho Man Randy Savage Ric Flair match for the world title. When they taped it, Savage was the champion. Randy comes out wearing the belt. In that time, Flair had won the belt. They had to do weird stuff with the entrances and only filming people from the nipples up and doing weird wide shots. The match ends with a run-in from Brian Pillman, who was no longer with the company and was doing that whole loose cannon, is he with WCW, is he not with WCW thing. It's a whole mess. And I think that's the set of tapings that kind of changed how they did things. They're like, we can't book Worldwide with angles on it, with things that could actually dictate some stuff that would happen in the main booking. We can't do that anymore with Nitro existing. From that point, they're like, screw it, we're just doing random matches. Just fly the whole roster down, and Terry Taylor would have a whiteboard up on the wall, and he would just point at guys and say, go out. At the end of 96, Disney and WCW split. They go their separate ways. Disney's like, we can't do this anymore. WCW's like, yeah, probably it's a good idea. We don't. So they moved the whole setup to Universal Studios. This is the period where you start getting stories of wrestlers getting blitzed at a bar called Pineapple Pete's down the road for the whole 2 weeks they're filming and not remembering anything that happened. James Mitchell and James Vandenberg talked about in his Ring of Honor shoot about how they would just go tape TV and there would be guys hallucinating. I think he was one of the ones who hallucinated in front of the cameras because they would get so intoxicated to get through filming 4, 5, 6 hours of TV a day, 6 days a week, 2 weeks in a row. And there would be 150 guys in the locker room. The big stars only had to come on one day. The first day, the Hulls and the Nashes and the DDPs, they came, they shot their matches, they could leave. But if you were Silver King, sorry, buddy, you're stuck in Orlando. You have to wait the whole day to find out who you were wrestling at 5 o'clock. You would have to stay in this little soundstage, this little locker room, not even a locker room, just trailers, because you would never know when you would get called out there to wrestle hard work Bobby Walker. And all the stories of wrestlers having to chemically get themselves through the week, and the randomness and the expedition of finding out that you're about to go out 5 minutes before you go out 7, 8 times a week. No wonder people didn't get hurt more. Wild to think there were any good matches on those shows. And there were a couple, but you'd also get weird stuff I've talked about in another video, Lynn Denton from Portland wrestling Atlantis from Mexico, neither of whom were under contract, but they were there in their gear. Terry's like, send them out to the ring, boys. And you'd think there would be more stories of wrestlers beating the crap out of each other for being in such close quarters, very tense, but the only one I can think of is Alex Wright getting pissed off at Hard Buddy Harrison because he didn't want to do what he was told by J.J. Dillon, who was the one agent for the entire set of shows. Hard Body's like, I'm going to take a shot at you. And Alex Wright's like, no, you're not. And then he took his little bendy thing, that exercise gimmick. He took it from him and beat the crap out of him with it. That's the only story of anyone getting into a fight at those shows I can think of. So that goes on for a couple years. And then at the end of 98, they kind of have to get budget conscious. And they realize that they're flying in literally hundreds of wrestlers to Orlando and housing them for 2 weeks to wrestle all these matches when they're already doing, Saturday night tapings where they could just hoard all those guys onto those that they're already flying them into. And that's what happened. Starting at the beginning of 1999, Worldwide becomes like a half clip show and then half dark matches from Saturday night tapings. Still very random because it's WCW. There's still going to be that aspect. But now at least, you're not having to stay for 2 weeks in one place and you can kind of just get your stuff done in one night. But the funniest part is all of these worldwide matches are happening in front of a gigantic Saturday night sign. Not even trying to hide it at all. And then at the end of 1999, they decide that, this is costing us too much money. And not all the other things we're wasting money on. And so they move all the worldwide matches from the Saturday night tapings, which are about to end anyway, to before Thunder, which was already on its last legs of being taped by itself. And that's when you get all the power plant guys that come in. And it's really awesome because they start booking indie guys again. And so you get all these Nashville guys and Wildside guys against the WCW TV guys. And you get the first looks at Mike Sanders, Jim Dragon O'Hare, Kwee-Wee, Elix Skipper, who was Skip Over. Great name. So on and so forth. And the way it was booked was David Pinzer would get the Thunder format. And he would look through and see who wasn't booked on Thunder. And then he would book the best matches he could for Worldwide. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. I don't think he's ever gotten. Because there's some good Worldwide matches around that time. Because he genuinely did try to book the best guys against the best guys. You get a lot of cool Young Dragons matches, a lot of cool Filthy Animals matches. So I say brava to David Pinzer for that. And even when they went to Nitro and Thunder tapings on Monday nights at the same time, they would still tape a worldwide match or two beforehand every week, even through the very end. But then, of course, WCW dies. Vince McMahon just had to buy it. Ugh. And believe it or not, the last WCW show that would make air was an episode of WCW Worldwide that went out into syndication the weekend of WrestleMania 17. Mike Tenay and Scott Hudson closed the doors on that bad boy. And that is a brief history of WCW Worldwide. If you liked the video, subscribe, comment, share, hype. And I don't get the hype thing, but whatever. If you see the button, click it. It helps. So yeah, become a member of the channel. I never promote that. I do members only streams where we watch things that are kind of like wrestling, but not really. So go check all those things out. Go watch some WCW Worldwide. Again, my name is Tom, and I think Mike and I have done our service for the community.